So please give a warm welcome to directors Troy Quane and Nick Bruno and creator Andy Stevenson. Welcome, gang. I'm going to start with a question about the design of the film, if you guys don't mind me diving into that. I was struck by the animation that the shapes were brought down to an essence, even to the fact that Nimona is done in circles and square shape for baluster. Can you talk about that approach?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was all very much to sort of define each character visually, which is such a great thing when you're working in a graphic novel, and we wanted to make sure we brought some of that element to the big screen. So, like you said, Nimona's got a very fluid sort of flame sort of overall shape. Baluster is very square and rigid, which kind of reflects his personality, and Goldenloin is like this sword, this sort of triangular sort of wedge type shape. And that was done really stylistically. We approached the animation in a very specific way to accomplish that. And it really is all feeding the metaphor of getting to know someone and getting to see someone. Because another thing we did with those characters is the closer they are to camera, the more details you get to see. And if you notice, the further characters got from the lens, the more they lost not just detail, but we actually went in and simplified their overall shape. And that was to represent the idea of the closer we allow people to get to us, the more we get to see all of those elements that make up their true individual self. The further we push people away, the further we hold them away from us, the more we just have to guess at who they are. We get to imply our own labels and ideas onto that generic form. So everything we were doing visually was to try and represent that. And actually, we were just talking about another little element, the character's eye dings. So, which is the light reflected in the character's eyes. Typically, is just circular or reflects the shape of the light that's creating it. For us, Aiden Sagan, our production designer, each character has a very specific eye ding. So Nimona is this little flame, Baluster is a square, Goldenloin is a triangle, the director's a diamond. Those all reflect their perspective in this movie. And as they go through the movie, as they get to know Nimona, as they start to see things differently and their perspective shifts, so do their eye dings. So Baluster's eye ding from the end goes from that square to the same shape as Nimona once he finally sees her, once he finally calls her by her name and acknowledges who she actually is. So that was a fun little thing to go back on Netflix and watch as many times as you can.
And when I introduced the film to them, I told them to keep an eye out on the lights and shadows. We're not used to seeing an animated film with so much darkness and shadows and characters hiding in the shadows. Can you talk about that approach to the filmmaking?
Yeah, no, hi everybody, what's up? How are you doing? Good morning-ish. Yeah, I was drinking all night, so it's very early morning for me. No, light and shadow. So, very early on, our production designer, Aiden Sagano, was like, I have this idea. I think it'd be really cool if the entire movie, our heroes, are in the shadows. Wherever they go, whatever's happening, we're like, that sounds absolutely crazy. Because, is it just going to be dark? Is it just going to be dingy the whole time? And he's like, no, I think there's a way to do it where even when they're in the shadows, there's more color, but you're with them. You're enjoying the journey with them, and it's just, these are characters that don't get to be in the light, that don't get to celebrate with the rest of the kingdom, in a sense. And it was this amazing challenge, and it was great around every corner to see how that came to life and told the story in a whole other dynamic way. Like, in particular, one of my favorite scenes is when you see young Nimona and young Glorith, and Nimona's in the shadows in the woods, right? And just feeling her being pulled out into the light for the first time, and her seeing the world in a whole new place. It's like, that's where you want to be, and then she's just driven back. And I love stuff like that, especially in animation.
Speaking about loving things in the film, your approach to color, to the two directors, we normally associate black and red with villains, and then in this case, we're seeing our heroes represented in that color, and then the director is represented in white. Can you tell us about that dynamic?
Yeah. I mean, it just follows up on the conversation of light. I mean, usually the villains are in the darkness and the heroes in the light. This is, again, it's all about perception. It's about getting to see people who they really are, not just assuming because they're represented a certain way that they are this, this trope that we've been told. So even in color, we wanted to, indeed create this incredible graphic novel, this character who just stands out on the page in this bright sort of pink color. And that was super important for us to anchor Nimona. One, because it's easy to find her in screen space, which is great. But two, this is a character who could be anything and anybody she wants. And she chooses this form, right? She chooses this because she's not ashamed of who she is. She's true to who she is. She's proud of who she is. And she wants to be seen for that. So this idea of making sure that she was always represented that way became really big. But then even beyond that, in the filmmaking, we wanted to take that idea of color to represent Nimona's, emotional space within the movie. So, when you go back and watch it again, if you watch when Nimona's feeling connected, when she's feeling seen, when she's feeling like, maybe her and Ballister are on a path to some sort of friendship, we fill the frame with color, right? It's her color. The lighting takes on this pink hue.
Right?
Yeah, we do chromatic aberration in all our lens flares, which is this prismatic breakup. So you get this little rainbow-edged hue on those lens flares. And that's really represented that Nimona is affecting the world with her feeling of positivity. But conversely, when she's feeling separated, when she's feeling judged, when she's feeling frustrated, we start to drain color out of the frame. It goes very monochrome. In fact, you just watched the movie at Nimona's lowest point in the third act, when it feels like all hope is lost, we literally go black and white for a few frames of the movie. Like there's absolutely zero color whatsoever. And that's because she's lost all hope. So it became a very interesting visual language for us to play to represent where Nimona was in the story.
And tell us about the journey of creating Nimona. We're used to seeing in animated films the young heroine, it goes on a journey of discovery, but in the case of Nimona, I've never seen a character like this. She knows who she is from the get-go. Tell us about the origins.
Yeah, this character was, she was one that at the time, I was coming into my own as a storyteller. I was starting to find my voice in comics, and I had always loved shapeshifters, always loved villains, and I wasn't seeing the kinds of characters that I wanted to see, especially female characters. And so the character really became this kind of answer to that, of just even seeing how that would work to show a story from her point of view. And she's chubby and curvy and punk and gender nonconforming, and she's all over the place. She's sort of the other characters have to rush to keep up with her. She always breaks expectations. She always kind of shatters the frame she's in. And she's a mystery. She's a mystery that can't be solved. She's never, I think the idea behind the character is that there's really no answer to her. Everyone wants to know, who are you really? And there's no answer to that. She's almost the essence of who she really is who she is in the middle of shapeshifting from one form to another. Mm-hmm. And so every time a character demands to know who she really is, they find that their assumption about what that is wrong. Which is something that I think, she's kind of the catalyst that makes this movie happen. So much of the rest of it is that it's these tropes that we recognize. The hero, the villain, the light, the dark, all of that, and she doesn't fit any of that. And she really blows the whole movie up and just infuses it with her color. That color is the way that you track her through the story. And it is a color that doesn't really appear anywhere else in the comic. So she really both stands out and then also defines what the world and what the story is.
When you heard that the film was going to happen, were there aspects of the story that you were concerned that would be sanitized or not addressed?
Definitely. I mean, there were conversations about that early on, about just is this too much? Is this going too far? What I really appreciate about these ding-dongs over here.
Said with love.
I'm Ding.
Wait a
Figure it
minute.
out from there.
We didn't get to discuss this beforehand. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with how this just broke down.
They never know what I'm going to say at this point. I never know what I'm going to say. It always just comes out. Said with much affection, but also ding-dongs, totally. We were drinking like buckets of a shark-themed cocktail last night, thanks to Julie Zachary, our producer. So
This
we're
place is
excited to
great.
be here, and also. But yeah, no, it was like I really wanted this story to feel like alive and to feel sharp, and it could be different, it could change, but I just like felt like it had to be true to the spirit of that character who refuses to follow the rules, and that included refusing to follow the conventions of animated films. And so I really appreciated once those conversations started happening, and they kept that conversation going and kept me in the loop. And now we've been hanging out for like 3 weeks straight, and it's been amazing. And it's just like, it's like, it became something that felt like it was like everyone was trying to stay in service to this character and bring her to life and bring her spirit to life. And I think her spirit kept us going when the movie got killed. And then rose from the dead again. And it was kind of because of that, I think that like rebellious energy that was at the heart of the story.
To the three of you, were you concerned? You know, I'm watching when she becomes a monster, the shadow monster is such a potent and scary moment. Were you guys concerned about that aspect of the story?
Concerned? No. I mean, we wanted to be delicate with it and truthful about it. But I think for us, when we read the graphic novel and we saw the movie, it was super important as part of the storytelling. That, you know, you talked about like the typical journey of some of these, you know, especially teenage female lead. The word affirmational gets thrown around a lot, and that tends to mean someone who's always right and always nice and always kind and can't raise their voice or get frustrated or get angry. And that's such an impossible task. It's not real. I mean, we as human beings have all those elements. You can be lovable and likable and happy and get frustrated and lash out and be angry. And it became really important that we stayed true to letting Nimona be that and express that. And I think, to Andy's point, that's why the character has been resonating so much with people in a surprising way. It's allowed her to just speak truly to what we all experience. There's times when we want to be good, and there's times when frustration or anger or hurt and pain get the better of us, and we just got the ability to represent that visually with this shadow creature idea of Nimona. And then again, turn it on its ear when Ballister finally does see her for the first time in a true way. It allows her to embrace all that and turn that, and she literally becomes light. And it was just a fun sort of visual dichotomy to play with.
I think there was pushback, though, early on, and it was, like, even on the graphic novel side. There was the concern that this was going to be too scary and alienate people, and it's like, oh, like, you know, like Troy said, is she aspirational enough? And it was something that's like, you have to get it right. It is, in the comic, it's even darker. Like, she is destroying the city, and so it's like, how do you find that for this family movie and make that feel right? But it was a long journey. It was a big conversation, and there was a lot of, like, fear and pushback initially, and I think that finding that moment of, like, bringing her grief to the front, of just feeling so alone, and yeah, so much of the damage that is done to the city in the movie version, which I think is expertly done, it comes from the institution trying to fire on her and firing on themselves.
Your original story was somewhat episodic. When you were working on the script with them, reconfiguring the story, was that a challenge? Was it exciting?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously very scary to make something that is so personal and then kind of turn it over and be like, yeah, good luck. This is a little piece of my heart, still a little bloody. Take care of it, I guess. But that's also what happens, you know. It's like, and also I think that it was really important that the movie did its own thing, you know. I mean, a comic, really proud of the comic. Comic is still out there. This needs to be its own thing. So it was really great to just be able to, like, at first it was very scary, and at first there were times that I'm like, I don't know, like, I don't know if this reflects what I want to see from this movie. So to get to the place where that conversation is happening, and it's like everyone is interested in bringing that heart. It ended up really cool. I feel like they end up like knocking me on my ass a bunch of times with like themes from the comic that I didn't even necessarily know were there. And then 10 years later, they're being brought back in this whole new way. And this movie is kind of evolving that story and those characters into the future, which is like, I think, what you need to do with an adaptation. So definitely hard and scary, but extremely rewarding in the end.
The film, its themes feel so relevant and so current. You guys have been in development for a long time with this, but were you always aware of its impact current? I mean, like, you know, a couple of days ago, the Supreme Court, you know, the relevance of this film is huge, and it just keeps growing. Were you guys always aware of it?
I mean, yeah, very much so. You know, but that's not to say we didn't go down some other paths that weren't right. You know, when you make a movie, particularly in animation, you do a lot of exploring, and the graphic novel had so many great aspects to it that it was fun to try to put all of it in. But at the end of the day, we really had to see what was the story that we're trying to tell. What's one clear story? One of our producers, Karen Ryan, did this great thing where, you know, when we were particularly struggling with the reels, it was like, let's go out to everybody at Blue Sky Studios and see what the movie means to them, and what their connection is to it. And the answer was, you know, it was a universal story, and it's a love letter to any of those who've ever felt misunderstood. But there was a particular group of people at Blue Sky, members of the LGBTQ+ community, who felt extra passionate about it. The benefit of having a graphic novel out there is that it also already has a connection and a contract with its viewers, and that's what it meant to them. And it became it was easy for us to notice we haven't gone down that path. We haven't leaned into Nimona as the main character, as the, you know, the draw and the themes, and we simplified that, and that was when, you know, for the first time the movie really started clicking, and we knew what we're saying, and we knew who these characters were and how they were interacting, and why there needs to be demon babies. But that's when it really clicked for us.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback on that a little bit, the more we became specific about that storytelling, the more we tried to be honest and truthful with that, the more universal. I think a lot of times there's that want to make it accessible to everybody, but the more we actually were specific, the more universal the character became, and it was a really amazing thing for us to watch happen, that regardless of people's experiences and backgrounds, and there was this connection to this character, and I just think that shows how, you know, the human experience is a connected one, that we choose to find ways to divide and to make different and to ostracize, and hopefully people can watch this movie, have a good time, and sort of feel that connection.
One of the most touching moments is the same-sex kiss. Was there at any point the powers that be told you, no, you cannot?
Of course not. It was embraced from the beginning, fully supported, and yeah, I mean, there's always conversation. I mean, but it was, again, felt like it was the way this story had to go. It was who these characters were. It didn't feel to us, and hopefully not in the film, that it was some additional sort of layer we were slapping on the surface, some veneer to check a box. It's part of who these characters are and the DNA of the story. And it was just our job to be honest about that and truthful and represent that.
What is really hard from the beginning of our journey is that, you know, you always hear Guillermo del Toro talking about animation as a genre, and I think what he really means is that everyone brings their rules to it. It's got to be like this, and it's got to fit into this little box, and it's got to be safe for everybody to want to see, and it's got to reflect this weird, whatever somebody deems as a utopian place. And for us, it felt like we were often getting pushback on doing these different things. Like, they bought the project, they knew what it was, but it wasn't always accepted. And, you know, after we were shut down and dead, it was amazing to have Megan Ellison see this movie, see that it's different than anything else, see that it's true, and see that it was a movie that she needed when she was a kid. And she forked up gobs of cash, like James Bond villain types of money, to pull it from a dead grave, and so that, you know, other little versions of Megan out there can see that movie. And yeah, we wouldn't be here without her.
Yeah, it was weird that her production studio was actually in a volcano. That should have been her first.
I'm a big fan of the score, Christopher Beck. You know, can you tell us about working with him? I even heard theremin, you know, which is the instrument that we normally relate with monster movies. You know, Tell us about the.
It was amazing. I mean, Christoph is just a very soulful, thoughtful person to begin with. And when we went to him, we were basically saying, listen, we're making this big fantasy movie. We want that traditional, classic sort of sound to support everything, but at the same time, make it really contemporary, modern, and and then we just sort of pushed him into another room and said, go crazy. And he did, and he came back with this score that just somehow shifts and changes and weaves its way through the movie and supports it to the point where we're sitting in editorial or we're sitting in final mix and just going like, drop everything else out. Just let the score take this moment. Like, I don't want to hear a sound effect. I don't want to hear all this dialogue we had. Who cares? Just make it go away, because the music was so tied into the experience of what was happening. I think, at least I can't listen to that theme of Nimona's at the end when in the flashback when she's a little girl and you hear that vocal kick in, and I still get like moved by it. It's just it just gets into your chest in an incredible way.
And how did you get the Sex Pistols guitarist to be involved in the production?
This is punk rock. I mean, this is the whole thing about Nimona is she's pretty punk rock, right? Because the flip side of that, when Nick and I start a movie, we like to make little mixed tapes for each other just to sort of describe the emotion and the action. And this is a crowd that still remembers mixed tapes, I think, in some places. It's funny, I make that statement sometimes, and I just see people blankly look.
It's like a Spotify list without or with effort, I should say.
With the effort, yeah. But we knew we wanted this sort of female-forward punk rock, kick-ass sort of needle drops to anchor a lot of the action sequences. So when we were, kicking off to Christoph, we were like, you need to weave this score into, this other element that, could be a really weird collision. And part of that was him coming back and saying like, well, why don't we just go to the source? Like, just you want that grunge, you want that sort of raw edge. Where better to find it? So he brought that conversation up, and it just helps everything fit together so wonderfully.
Speaking of kick-ass, tell us about bringing Hit Girl to play Nimona.
Chloe is, it's funny, I know we worked with her, she does a voice in the movie, but she's just amazing. Like, I just genuinely love her as a person. She's so funny, darkly funny. And also so sweet. When we first started, we listened to a bunch of voices trying to figure out what's right, and part of that is also who has a heart, connected to the journey. We brought her in, and she did, the first scene that she did was that scene where they go back to the lair, and she's talking about a heart, her heart and swords, and, maybe I would feel like I should let him essentially kill her. And it was like, that seems like a great scene to start with. That's not heavy and emotional at all. But we knew she was really funny, and then she delivered that on our first take. We were all like in tears. It just, there's great actors, but it's also just a voice, right? So all that acting can come through in the voice, the little cracks in her voice, the little modulation she has. It's just so powerful, and then she's so game to play and do anything, and she just throw caution to the wind and just have fun and be silly in a room, and that fun we had in the room with her, I think, totally comes out and across on the screen with the character.
I think what's really cool about what she does is that it was so hard for me to imagine anyone's voice as that character, because she's been in my head for so long, but she every single line she does is different from the one before. And it's something that in a comic you can sell by doing a sudden capitals, or her word balloon will overlap balusters or something like that. But she really brings almost just a different cadence, a different level of her register. The same way her character is always moving, she's also her emotions shift so quickly. Every single line, you never know where it's gonna come from, and it's extremely cool.
Piggybacking on the idea of movement, I noticed that Nimona, the way she moves, there's no nervous energy. It's committed to her movement. She's comfortable. Can you tell us about that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, that was something that was just so amazingly entertaining and clear in the graphic novel. Like Andy said, even the frames of the comic couldn't contain this character. And so, that was something we just challenged all our animators. We were like, Nimona doesn't know how to sit in a chair. She's not going to walk around a table to get out the door. She's going to go over the table. Just finding interesting, unexpected ways to make sure that when she enters a frame, it comes from somewhere you didn't see before, and people are constantly being surprised by that. She'll disappear from one space and suddenly be hanging in a car from the ceiling, reading a newspaper like she'd been there all day. So it was always looking for those elements, and then taking that a step further in her transformations. We didn't want that just to feel like it was some magic applied to the surface of this character. It's part of who she is. It's an expression of how she's feeling and what's happening. So the challenge for the animators was always like, if you had no effects work to put on top of this, to hide behind, this transformation has to feel like it is just the natural expression of one form going into the other. It has to feel fluid, it has to feel like it's driven from her emotion. So if she's in a really great mood, she's excited about something, it's gonna be really poppy and big and fun and sprightly, and if she's feeling really heavy and emotional, that the transformation almost just like falls off her in that way. So making sure it was always driven from a place of her emotion. And it just became a really fun challenge, and I think a really unique aspect of this character.
And the production design, arriving into this world that is medieval but also contemporary, can you tell us, the journey of that design?
Yeah, well, I mean, do you want to talk about that? You started that.
I mean, yeah, for me, I was just like, knights are cool and laser guns are cool, and I think I could draw that. But it was a very broadly sketched world. It relied a lot on the reader knowing a lot of these tropes already, tropes of futuristic societies, tropes of knights, tropes of superheroes even. That's like in the comic a lot. And then using those to the audience. The world is very broadly sketched. There's not a ton of detail in the world. So the reader sort of imagines something that is unseen just from the silhouette of a castle and, a refrigerator and like a laser lance or something. But I think, the idea of that world still feels very big. And then you had the delightful and very easy, I'm sure, task of making that world actually big and moving and going all the different places of it.
Right. Yeah, it was just me specifically. Nobody else.
It was Nick. It was Nick.
But I had a computer.
A highlighter and a Post-it note.
No, what we loved about the world was one, it's really just cool and it's fun to be in, but also what it says about being a medieval future. Right? We live in a world that has all these advances in technology, yet a mindset and a feudal past. So it really matches the themes of what the story is saying. And it's what kills me sometimes is it's not too unlike the world we live in. I live in New York City. There's very old stuff there, and then there's some old-ass opinions, too, that come with it that are not great. But it's still a cool world. It's still a world we all want to live in, and we should all be able to share.
And now having seen the final product, how does it feel for you? Did it meet up with your expectations?
It's been such a long journey for me. For the story, it's been over 10 years. For the movie, it's been 7. And there were many times where I just didn't know if it was gonna happen, or there were lots of times I didn't think it was gonna happen. Like at the start, it's such a long shot to option something like this and have it get made. It just doesn't happen a lot. And then it literally got canceled. And it didn't seem like there was a way forward. And then this incredible group of people fought for it, literally formed a new company, fought, a huge corporation in order to bring this movie back to life. And I just feel so incredibly honored just to be here, just to be a part of this at all, just to see these characters on the screen and recognize them and feel like this piece of my heart it's mine and it's not, and it's out in the world and it's growing and it belongs to so many other people now. I think that is the part that I feel the most excited about and the most honored about, is that so many people believed in this what was at the time a little bit of a cry for help, coming from just a lonely teenager that I was when I first started this, and that so many people believed in that and latched onto that and took that story and built on it and defended it. Yeah. And now we're here, and now you've seen it, and it's a pretty incredible feeling. I could not be more proud.
I explained to I explained to them the process, in abbreviated their journey, and the fact that it was canceled, and then Megan Ellison picked it up, but also COVID came into the picture. Did you guys, now in hindsight, did you find that this process of being canceled and then being picked up and COVID, did it make the film better?
I mean, yeah, it made us stronger. It wasn't pretty incredible. I mean, when Nick and I came on board, like 4 days later, they said, "Oh, everyone has to go home for 2 weeks, but we'll be back." Cut to like 2.5 years later. It was a challenge. So it was a challenge just technically, technologically, how to make it happen. But I think it was just a matter of us understanding the story we were trying to tell and what we wanted to say. And honestly, we went from a big studio film, which comes with a lot of expectation and pressure and ideas on how that should happen, to really an independent movie once the studio closed down and Megan stepped in. And the amazing thing is, once that happened, you're a little gun shy. You're waiting for the kick to come in or the kidney punch to happen, and you're like, oh, what are the notes going to be now? And Megan was like, make the movie. Make the movie you set to make. Is there anything you didn't get to do? You should lean into that. We went to Netflix, and we're like, oh, here we go. And Netflix was like, what can we do to support this? Was there anything you didn't have a voice for that you feel is important to this movie? And it was honestly the most amazing experience as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, to see that kind of support. Just not something that happens every day. And I think, yeah, it was, if nothing else, the small silver lining to losing a studio, losing a home where all your friends were for decades. I think the fact that this movie is what it is because of the journey it took is absolutely the truth.
Just one thing I want to add to it is I was at Blue Sky for what felt like an eternity. I loved it there, and that's not a negative thing. It was like better part of 2 decades. I love that place. I love the people. It's such a diverse group of people making animated films, trying to get stories like this out there. When they closed Blue Sky, we went out and we went to a bigger world, right? Like, it was no longer just animators within this little studio in Greenwich, Connecticut. There was people in London and Montreal and all around the world. I don't know my geography, so I'll just leave it to those 2 examples. But what became pretty amazing is that you do realize that there are stories out there that need to be told that do speak to the entire world and on behalf of the entire world. And we have all these amazing animators and just a few people at the top of these studios that don't allow those stories to be told in the world. And I think, I really hope that a movie like this going out and getting a good reception will help allow more stories to be told, help those artists, those amazing artists in those studios to continue to push and get a little bit more of an open door to tell those stories as well.
On that note, thank you so much for being here. What an incredible film. I'm just so proud of what you guys have accomplished. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.